Hi everyone, this is Syrian Girl. I'm here with the founder of Panquake, Suzie Dawson, and Panquake's security officer, Sean O'Brien. And they're going to tell us why we shouldn't download the Gettr app that's everyone's been, talking about lately. And they're going to talk to us about why Panquake is going to be the much better alternative and how it's been going with development of Panquake. Thanks, guys, for coming here and talking to us.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's my pleasure. I guess we can start with the hottest news. What is Gettr? If I can give it a short introduction, I think Dr. Malone, one of the doctors that came out against the mRNA vaccines, and I think he was the founder of the mRNA technology, or one of the founders. He was recently censored off Twitter and then interviewed by Joe Rogan on his program. And he said that he was going to switch to a new platform called Gettr. And as a result, many thousands upon thousands of people who watched Joe Rogan went out and downloaded. But this thing is not as it seems. So I would like to give the floor first to Sean to explain to us. He's just written an article on the Talk Liberation website, which is in fact a privacy-focused publication educating users about data security. But yeah, you've just written this article. I'm looking at it right now. What are you really getting with Gettr? Can you explain to us, Sean, about this?
Sure. So first, I just want to reiterate, there is a big problem with big tech, right? And this is why people are flocking this week. Obviously, it helps to have a celebrity, sort of tacitly endorse the network. But folks are just very eager to get out of the abusive situation they're in with Twitter and Facebook and YouTube and so on. So it's no surprise that people would jump to another platform. The reason we looked at Gettr is not because we're trying to deride alternative platforms, of course. I mean, obviously, both Suzie and I have basically dedicated enormous amounts, basically our lives at this point, to trying to build replacements for big tech. The reason we looked at Gettr is because it's uniquely bad. And, we're not trying to pull apart the Gabs and the Parlors and the Mastodons and so on. And we wanted to make sure that we were just communicating, how dangerous some of the problems with Gettr are. So the first one you identify, certainly privacy and security issues, there are tons of them. But going further than that, Gettr is being very disingenuous. They are shoving their users into the same tracking, the same surveillance from Google and Facebook that they pretend, they're getting people away from. So there's Google and Facebook trackers embedded throughout both the smartphone and web versions of Gettr. And these follow people and do cross-device tracking across the web in the same way that people are unfortunately subjected when they're in the Facebooks and the Googles and so on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the origins of Gettr are kind of murky and interesting, I should say. And that's actually weighs a bit on the security situation. So Gettr was founded, at least this current iteration, by a guy named Jason Miller. Jason Miller was a senior advisor for the Trump administration. And he's allied himself with a billionaire businessman from China who was working with Steve Bannon on a project called GTV, or G News. And they actually created the thing that is now Gettr. They created something called Get to Me, I think it is. It's GETOME. And that app was just rebranded. The current users who were in that network, and we don't know how many, but they were booted out of the network. Then they basically took that, stuck the Gettr logo on it, and shipped it off to people as Gettr. So our investigation, a lot of this was already known about the business relationship and so on, but our investigation found that that app is still available in Google Play. You can download it, and you can interact with users on the network. And so this is basically a backdoor into Gettr. That app is old, it's unpatched. Any security updates, any changes to moderation or anything around the Gettr app that the Gettr admins push to the new version of the app is not going to make its way downstream to that old, outdated version. And yet, it was trivial just to grab this thing, install it, go on the network, post, follow people, and so on. That taken with all the other stuff we found, I mean, we were able to scrape information from the Gettr API very easily, which could be used to build big maps of followers and so on. And there was no restriction on that. All of that taken together is uniquely dangerous. And that's the reason we decided to write about it. There's
a lot to unpack there. There's free speech concerns. There's big tech data mining, they could sell your data, security concerns, there's an agenda, you have like certain people like Miller, the Chinese businessman, and the Trump administration and their ties to that. So we have, I guess the first thing is, let's go for censorship. I understand that one of the first people that they censored was Nick Fuentes, which is a conservative America First speaker. And can you tell us how would you handle specific users and their political views when it comes to Panquake? Is there any kind of censorship on that front?
I come at it from a human rights perspective fundamentally. We have a set of political rights. We have a right to political expression. We have a right to free political expression. We have a right to freedom of communication. We have a right to freedom of association. And so Panquake, for me, is about enforcing those human rights, but that have been systematically degraded and taken away from us by corporations and governments and security agencies. So as long as your expression is free political expression, which is a totally different thing from targeted harassment and stalking someone. You don't have the right to stalk someone. You don't have the right to try and destroy someone's life, but you do have the right to express yourself freely on political grounds, and that needs to be respected by any platform, in my opinion.
Excellent way to put it. So I suppose we can move on then to the data mining and the privacy concerns. I get a lot, first of all, please try to help us understand it, Sean. But also, I get a lot of people saying, well, now it's 2022, you're on the internet. If you think you have any privacy, then you're just deluding yourself. And you're on Twitter, you're already being data mined. You're on Facebook, you're already being data mined. So if you could please speak to how Gettr is uniquely bad in this aspect. And then I will go to Suzie and perhaps you can expand on it.
Sure. So our analysis did a teardown of the smartphone apps, the website, the web app, obviously. We went through network infrastructure and sort of looked at the way everything is set up. We looked through at common security issues or, screw ups, frankly, that a lot of folks on the web do. Gettr does all of this stuff, right? They have privacy issues, they have security issues, they're shoving surveillance into everything they can touch. And just to sort of transition from the previous points, it seems to me that there is not enough care for users from the admins of Gettr who are running this network. And one could say that may be because getting data about the users in the network is the primary function of Gettr. What security researchers sometimes call honeypot, which would be a trap for, people. This sort of seems to me like it's approaching that. Obviously, I can't say what the motivations are, but it does very much look like that. The backdoor I talked about, that app that is old, that is outdated, that still runs on the network, that kind of thing could be used to basically, set up a bot and go around and auto follow users and then, inject malicious code into posts. Gettr has issues throughout the app that allow this sort of thing to happen. When you're browsing Gettr, when you're going through it on the app on your smartphone, you're actually connected to dozens of websites around the internet. Gettr loads their content directly off of these servers. So they do what's called hot linking, right? Which is very bad practice in this context, which means you're just constantly connecting to all these other servers as you click on news articles, as you post stuff yourself. And those connections stay open for the most part, have their own issues with tracking, and you're just basically building out this giant web. So as we were browsing, sort of testing this, and we have in the article, sort of a simplified map of this, you would just see, a big spider web of connections sort of building as you're going through. And, I can't imagine someone leaving a tab open in their browser for a day, how bad that situation gets. So again, there are some serious questions about the motivations of the network operators leaving things this wide open, allowing them to be scraped and so on. If you were, for example, to be building a network to surveil people for political purposes, this is the kind of network you would be building. So
if I was a Gettr user and I clicked on a link from Gettr to a news article and I kept that tab open and then I started searching other stuff using that tab, does Gettr then get every bit of internet that I browse that day?
So, it depends is the quick answer, but because they're using these tracking cookies and these tracking pixels that are linked to big tech, that allows across those sites, which many of them also use that, right, to be tracking you while you're in Gettr, associating your activity, your behavior, your clicks, who you're talking to, when you're talking to them, what time of day it is, guesses about, you based upon your browser, so your time zone, your location, all of that is very much known. And we found very particularly aggressive trackers that aren't big tech also embedded in all this. So one of them, Apps Flyer, was scooping up massive amounts of information about the user, both through the web and the app, and focusing on fine-grained location. So, that kind of location tracking, as I'm sure anyone knows who's ever been targeted, is a huge, huge deal. And it's also going to allow, for example, if there is a data breach, if there are ways, and like I said, it doesn't look very good, things are kind of sloppy, that location information is going to be very problematic if it gets out. People will be able to be mapped, their movements for entire days, weeks, and depending on how long they're in the network and using it, potentially years, right? So that's scary stuff. And that's one of the reasons we're talking about it sort of as a uniquely dangerous thing. One other point I just want to also bring up, there are issues with networks that don't have in-your-face advertising, right, that are still tracking you in the background. We tend to say, well, if you get something for free on the internet, right, and you are the product, right? You're probably the product being tracked by these advertising brokers. And usually we see some ads, right, in some of these networks, and that annoys the hell out of people. In Gettr, there aren't the ads in your face, but there is massive amounts of that tracking going on in the background. And that should lead us to question the business model itself. I think it's very likely, and it seems to me, that the business model is selling these profiles, sharing them with third parties, making money off of them, gaining insights about someone, about their political situation, and so on. And it's very clear and obvious and upfront to a large extent, the political background and the political ideology of the folks behind the network. I don't want to judge or get into any of that, but people should just be made aware. If there's a mega breach of this stuff, you're going to be lumped in with the folks running the network. So if you are not a fan of Steve Bannon, you may want to think twice about being in Gettr.
Thank you for that. And Suzie, I would like to open the floor to you to explain how Panquake would be different, how it would not data mine or not track, if you could touch on that.
Sure. So architecturally, literally every single decision that has been made about the design and the build of Panquake.com has been for the benefit of the user and not for the network. And that's because we make our user our customer. Our user pays just a basic $5 a month subscription fee. And for that, we have completely excluded the whole data mining ecosystem from the architecture of Pancake. We don't track our users. We don't spy on our users. We don't collect their personally identifiable information. We don't collect their email addresses, their phone numbers. We don't collect their connection information. We don't fingerprint their devices. We don't fingerprint their browsers. And these are all things that big tech applications, including Gettr, which essentially at this point is a big tech application, at least feeding into that big tech ecosystem. That they are all doing to every single one of the users. So we don't exploit our users. We protect our users. User data on Pancake stays on the user device. The users remain in control of and in custody of their own data. We don't copy it, we don't collect it, and we sure as hell don't sell it. So it's just a completely new model where the user is the most valuable component in the network rather than the advertiser or the corporate sponsor or the corporate shareholder investor being the most valuable and the user being the product. So it's total paradigm shift. And just to add to what Sean was saying about Gettr, when you download the Gettr app, it asks for 34 device permissions. It owns your phone. There's no other way to put it. It owns everything, your contacts, your microphone, your camera, your everything. 34 different device permissions. On Pancake, when you download it, it will not require any device permissions because we don't want any of that stuff from you. So again, total paradigm shift. And Gettr is not, it's not just that they're collecting and monetizing your data like Twitter does or like Facebook does. They're piping your data straight back into Facebook and straight back into Google. So you think you're getting away from big tech, but actually big tech is still getting you when you use Gettr. And it's just that Gettr is now making money off big tech getting you as well as big tech getting you. So you're not escaping anything. And when Sean talks about this older app Gettr being like a backdoor into the network, because of the total, comparative lack of security considerations, that's actually a vulnerability for exploiting your devices. So someone can access through the old Gettr app, contribute content into the Gettr network that is malicious in nature. They can literally put viruses into the network. They can compromise user devices. So Gettr is wide open for your device to actually be hacked, as for you having used it. So it's seriously dangerous stuff. It's one thing for people to be scraping data and spying on the network as a whole. It's another thing for them to be able to go after specific accounts, target specific accounts, and seek to compromise the devices of those users for whatever reason they're doing it for. So that's why, I have a list a mile long of beefs with Twitter. I am so upset at Twitter. That's why we created Pancake. I think I consider Twitter to basically be an intelligence service. They may as well be. And for the users of Twitter to be targets of that intelligence gathering. I would say it that strongly. That's my belief. But Gettr is actually a step worse than Twitter. And I didn't ever think I would get in a position where I would be recommending Twitter over anything else. But in this particular case, I would actually say that users are better off with Twitter than they are with Gettr. And Twitter's certainly not paying me to say that, having just wiped out all of our accounts, all the Pancake accounts actually, a couple of weeks ago. So Twitter is terrible,
interesting.
but Gettr is terrible plus plus plus.
It's interesting that Twitter hasn't wiped out Gettr Twitter handles, but it has wiped out Pancake's handles. And I think that's very important to note that Gettr is on the Google Play app, it's on the Apple, you can download it. The apps are not being blocked, but Gab's apps were blocked. And I believe Pancake hasn't been approved for download on the Google Play or Apple. Is that true?
Yeah, well, our plans don't involve those platforms. We'll be delivering our own app via our own website. People will be able to download it from us. If we can list our app in those places, then fine, we will. But we haven't, in no aspect of this business has been reliant upon the good graces of the tech overlords. Like, our business is domiciled outside of US jurisdiction. Our hosting is outside of jurisdiction. We've made sure that they can't mess with us. They can't do to us what they did to Parler, or other, apps like Gab or whoever else who they've also targeted. So there is definite hostility from the tech overlords to Pancake. But you're correct that that's indicative of the fact that we are legit and we're a real threat. And if Gettr was legit and a real threat, then big tech would be going for their throats. But Gettr's model facilitates big tech spying and data mining and profiteering off of users. So that's probably why, as yet, you haven't seen any serious opposition or resistance to them.
So I have a few more questions in mind. I guess nobody has mentioned Cambridge Analytica. But as I know that Suzie, you told me about a documentary recently that explains to people how it is bad, because I think people are just so used to being abused that it just becomes like part of their life, and they're just giving up on privacy completely. And it's quite tragic, and I really don't think people are aware of the background of that. I don't know if there's a question there, but did you want to say anything about...
Well, you're correct that Steve Bannon was the vice president of Cambridge Analytica through the time that it was found that Cambridge Analytica were building political profiles on over 5 million Americans, packaging and selling that data to political campaigns so that those users could then be inundated with political messaging that suited the purchases involved. So that is his background. That's what he does. And it seems that Gettr is exactly that. When you log on to Gettr, 1/3 of their interface is all political messaging that serves the interests of Bannon. You see Bannon's war room pinned to the top. You see all of these Trump people that are the executives at Gettr, like, fully taking up 1/3 of the interface with their messaging and basically advertising themselves. That is something you will never see on Pancake. When we say that there's no advertising on Pancake, we include Pancake advertising in that. You won't see me or Sean in 1/3 of your interface. You won't see Pancake messaging in 1/3 of your interface. Your interface will contain the content that you want to engage with, and only that. And no paid boosting of content, nothing like that. So totally different thing. So this does look like it's going to be Cambridge Analytica scandal 2.0. I mean, it really does. And it does look like a political campaign database that is dressed up as a social media application. And it looks like they're building the foundations of a Trump 2024 social media campaign under the guise of providing a service to users. But actually, the service is to political paymasters, and the users are what they're delivering to them. So it is, I mean, if you're fine with that, then cool, great. If you're fine with those things, then go for it. But if you're not okay with that, if you're actually really concerned about having all of your movements and communications spied on, monitored, packaged, and sold to corporations and to political operatives, then Gettr is definitely not the place for you.
Well, I think that people see Bannon and Trump as a lesser evil compared to Hillary, but it's important to be aware. While I'm still with you, Suzie, I'll move back to Sean in a minute. But we spoke previously, and you know a little bit more about Nick Fuentes and his situation. And basically, he was censored off Twitter right after being involved in a debate on Alex Jones with a lawyer, Barney's Law, I think his Twitter handle is. and it was about Israel. And basically, Nick had become completely against Israel after the last bombardment of Gaza. And you pointed out to me that some of the CEOs or people that are involved with Gettr have a conflict of interest when it comes to that. Can you?
I definitely don't have any in-depth knowledge about it, but I did just read Twitter bios, and they make pretty apparent in their own Twitter bios what their allegiances are. So I would just say do your own research, check out who these people are. They're not hard to find. The various Gettr executives, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's no surprise to anyone that Trump is super pro-Israel, given the moving of the US embassy, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, I mean, I can't speak to like what degree of influence exists in Gettr from Israel, but I can tell you that no government is involved in Panquake, none. And Panquake does not serve any government as a master. And with us, it's not just about like believe us because we say it. It's about architecturally proving our point. So all Panquake moderation is open to all users to review. So because we're a blockchain product, if you get suspended or banned or a post removed on Panquake, there is an open public record that this happened, what day it happened, what time it happened, what the reason for it happening was, who did it, what account it was done to, et cetera, et cetera. And that's something you don't have on Gettr. That's something you don't have on Facebook or on Twitter. On those platforms, you like sometimes don't find out for days or weeks that someone has been wiped out. You have no idea why. Twitter doesn't communicate its reasoning. It just gives these nonsense prefab, like automated emails that are totally irrelevant to the actual situation. And they have such appalling level of customer service that you never really feel like you're dealing with a real human being. Panquake has live 24/7 human customer support channels in the works. So with us, everyone will be able to review moderation and form an opinion about the moderation that's been taken, or be publicly accountable in that way. But we'll also have real humans for you to talk to if you have a problem with your account.
Thank you so much, Susie. I want to ask Sean, I'm reading your article right now. You touched on the fact that Gettr essentially assigns followers without actually giving you those followers. It just assigns the number. You also touched on Joe Rogan and why he would have just jumped on this maybe without prior investigation. And perhaps you can also touch on Dr. Malone and why he decided to jump on board the Gettr bandwagon.
Sure. So, I mean, as I'm sure everyone's aware, it's a sad state of affairs that folks feel like getting into something like this network, Gettr, is better than the situation they're facing every day in these big tech platforms. It is also based in the United States with all its infrastructure. It uses Amazon and Google infrastructure, right? So international users, of course, who are using Gettr are throwing themselves into that same jurisdictional US, American, dominated world. So that's something I just want to get across as well, that really for an international audience, we should be putting a fine point on as well. But yeah, I mean, it's not surprising that people are jumping into this. I make the point in the article, it's like things are so bad elsewhere that people are looking for anything and they're clamoring to jump ship, right? And this product was, backed by a billionaire and pushed, out very quickly and is out there for people to jump into now. So I get it. I mean, both Dr. Malone and Joe Rogan, obviously they were just having a conversation, but the reach of the Joe Rogan experience is incredible. I can't remember the numbers, but it dwarfs pretty much everything else. It's like 11 million downloads or something, which, dwarfs network television and everything else, basically. So it's not surprising when something is tacitly mentioned and the person running that show, Joe Rogan, his staff set up a profile for him, import his content from Twitter, and use the network, that people will start rushing towards it because they're looking for someone to tell them, hey, go use this, right? And that's sort of what happened this week, right? Close to 1 million people, as far as we can tell, actually did get into Gettr, and that's another reason, like, this network is growing. It's pretty substantial at this point. It's not just some niche thing that's not worth talking about. You will see most mainstream news articles sort of dismiss it that way. And, I think that's unfortunate because there's a real risk to these 4 million users who are currently in that network. So the issues that I point out in the article aren't so much about, the censorship and that sort of stuff. I get why people were jumping ship and would go in. The issues that I point out are around manipulation and algorithmic manipulation, potentially, artificial intelligence. We don't know. But these networks suggest users to you. As Suzie pointed out, 1/3 of the interface has a political agenda. There's a Bannon's War Room live stream with Jason Miller, who's the CEO, and they're talking about how great things are. And that's being shoved into people's faces. The news items, what they call trends sometimes, but they're really, catered news, that's being picked to be shoved in people's faces, whether they want to see it or not. If you have no users on the Gettr network, your timeline fills up with information from Jason Miller and some of these other accounts, and just, timeline fills up and does this. This is the kind of manipulation that is exactly what is problematic about the algorithms in Facebook, in Twitter, and these other networks. It's dangerous, it's manipulative. People are getting, followers suggested to them and pushing them in certain directions. And all the while you're being studied while that's happening, right? So, this is the kind of testing that you would do to, make predictions about people, especially if you were building a database that's a political database for, let's say, an upcoming election, right? So all that's going on. Beyond that, there seems to be bot activity. So I think the thing you're mostly pointing out here is a number of folks have noticed that they create an account. They don't have any followers. They've barely done anything. Maybe they've commented once on something and posted one thing or something. And then they start being flooded with followers. And the question is, well, how's that happening, right? The account, one of the testing accounts that I created when I was going in testing the network, also is just picking up followers, right? That sort of activity, which of course we see on Twitter and elsewhere, means very likely that there are bots trawling the network, right? Using the same kind of tools that I told you are just wide open, to find out who the followers are, who the users are in the network, and then to, basically spam them, follow them, surveil them, right? And if you do something like this, build your own bot network, right? You can potentially just trawl the entire Gettr network, know who all the users are, know who's talking to who and when, who their followers are and who they're following, and it becomes a very dangerous sort of thing. So yeah, that's the kind of activity that we're seeing. Now, of course, with Cambridge Analytica, right, to bring back to that conversation, this kind of automated, algorithmic, bot-based surveillance is, exactly what happened in that scandal, which only became a scandal, of course, because you had a whistleblower actually say, hey, something's wrong here. Now, that would involved about 50 million users, so as far as we know, maybe larger. But so the scale is different, certainly. But we'll see what happens with Gettr. If I were trying to be malicious, trying to study people, trying to scam people, Gettr is a good place to be doing that. And it's really a problem from that perspective as well.
Suzie comments on the fact that they're porting followers, like they're saying, for example.
Well, yeah. So you see Joe Rogan has 8.5 million followers on Gettr, but Gettr has 4.5 million people on the platform. Doesn't add up, right? And that's exactly what's happening is their statistics are, I mean, it's misrepresentative, it's misleading, it's like borderline fraudulent because they're not disclosing this in an open way to the users. So if you can't trust your engagement statistics, if you can't trust how many of your followers are legit followers, whether or not they really are interacting with your content, or whether it is some bots, and whether the followers that it says you have are even followers from that network or not. I mean, this all creates a really confusing picture for users. And the fact that most users aren't going to be aware of this, and they're just going to go, oh, Joe Rogan's got 8 million followers, therefore there must be 8 million people on this network, when there actually isn't. I mean, they're kind of playing on people's ignorance. They're kind of depending on people's ignorance. And I find that really offensive, because users should be able to believe in the integrity of the platform, and the platform should feel ethically compelled to earn that trust. If you can't believe what you can see on Gettr, then what are you doing there?
So Panquake, I understand, is not going to use algorithms.
None.
So whatever engagement you have, or is actually going to be, no shadow banning, there's no catered tweets, whatever you put out is, and yeah, it's going to be 1 + 1 will equal 2, not 5. So,
Absolutely. So the blockchain, again, is providing not just a record of moderation, it's providing a record of content and interaction. So if somebody likes your post or shares your post, that creates a blockchain record that is hyperlinked to in that interaction. And you can prove that someone liked it or someone shared it. Not just because we tell you, oh, +1 like or +1 share, and you don't know if that ever really happened. There's a real record of it. So again, it's about having proof of action, not just having to believe us or trust in us, but actually being able to prove that record. And you're correct that we don't believe in AI. We don't believe that AI functions correctly or justly or fairly. We think it's manipulative, and ethically, we're not okay with building a system that is dependent upon AI. So we are not doing any timeline manipulation, any content manipulation. Your customer service won't be AI-driven customer service like it is with Twitter, and our moderation won't be AI-driven either. It's entirely human-driven across the board.
okay, so 2 things are happening now. We have the internet is essentially, the internet is splintering into many different social media networks, and each one is kind of corralling that political viewpoint into an echo chamber. So you have Gettr, you have Parler, you have Gab. It's kind of just, you're preaching to the converted. You don't have access to the hearts and minds of the general public on these platforms. And I wanted to ask you, how is Panquake different in this respect? Because some of these other platforms, the so-called free speech platforms, have really aligned themselves with a particular political view.
Well, look, you don't have free speech if you don't have privacy. Privacy is the component that is needed in order for you to have free speech. Otherwise, you will be targeted for your speech. You will be manipulated for your speech. The things that you say will have very real consequences for you, even if they should be protected forms of speech. And so us bringing a private and secure platform to users and protecting users and giving them the ability to speak without those types of detrimental effects is in itself pretty groundbreaking. And you mentioned earlier, that people have just succumbed to the abuse, that they can't imagine that there is any other way. And part of that problem is the imagining and the hoping and the waiting, which we actually need to push aside and just get on with building. We need to build solutions. We need to build the world that we want to live in. We can't just sit and wait for other people to just miraculously deliver it to our doorstep. And Panquake exists because so far 3,380 people have said, I want to help build a different world. And they have gone to panquake.com, they've donated to the campaign, they're out there doing grassroots word of mouth marketing. Like, we haven't spent a single dollar on corporate advertising or PR. All of the buzz around Panquake has been generated by grassroots voices, understanding that if we all jump on board together, we can be something big, do something big, and deliver something really, truly different. And that's the mindset we have to have. The mindset can't be, oh, I'm so used to being abused, I just give up. The mindset has to be, I'm going to get off my butt. I'm going to help these people who have created a framework to make real change. I'm going to throw my full weight behind that, because we get stronger with every person who does that. Every person who jumps on board makes us stronger and increases our chance of being able to meaningfully influence the environmental conditions worldwide around use of the internet and political speech.
And Sean, do you have any other bits of information that maybe I haven't touched on that you think is really important for people to know?
Sure, and I just want to sort of also just add some, I guess, technical and architectural, comments on what you touched on with sort of these isolated, atomized networks that are out there. What's going on right now with the internet is we're seeing real changes. Some of those are decentralization, right? And there are different ways to sort of go about that. One of the ways you can go about it is the way you pointed out, which is sort of creating these walled gardens, these little fiefdoms, right, that people are running and pushing their own politics and so on and so forth. But another way you can do it is to take decentralization seriously, right? So you want to have your users actively participating as nodes in that network. And these blockchain technologies, allow for this sort of technical thing to happen. So that architecture is what we're building with Panquake. We're taking it very seriously. We're making sure we have strong encryption and so on. But we also are very interested in interoperability, right? We want to be able to make sure, as we grow the network, as we, get more users, as we are incredibly successful, right? If we reach those levels, we want to have interop with other networks. We want people to get, be able to link up to other places. And we will be working on that sort of thing as well. When I go into in the piece the whole thing about the API and it being wide open and so on, these APIs, application programming interfaces, are used typically for that kind of linking. But Gettr has, no restrictions, no API key to verify who's linking into it, who's et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to make clear, I'm not saying it's bad for networks to be able to link to each other or for users to be able to share information between different social networks. I think that stuff actually is going to be crucial, if we're going to have an internet that actually has a worldwide conversation. But, there are pretty awful ways that this network, specifically Gettr, is doing it. And that's one of the reasons I sort of dig into them on that aspect. Another thing I just want to point out, because, I think it's a little subsumed. There were so many bad things to talk about that, I didn't get to sort of emphasize some of them in the article as much as I would have liked. Smartphones, even if you think you're getting privacy from them, even if you think what's in the apps that you're downloading, they contain hidden code, hidden trackers, software development kits or SDKs. We talk about that in the Gettr article and the tracker SDKs that are in Gettr. And it's a good thing just to be aware of in general for users, right? Suzie talked a bit about app permissions. If an app is asking for a bunch of app permissions from you and you're not sure why they're asking for them, then you should probably stay away from that app. There's something else going on there. And often what's going on is these SD codes, which are sort of like hidden snippets of code that talk to other servers on the internet. Those are gathering up some sort of information. And they're running in the background all the time. And just like I said, when you're in Gettr, you're connected to all these domains, right? When you're running your app on your phone, because your phone is a computer, of course, connected to the internet, this stuff is just constantly trawling in the background. For example, and I I didn't want to get too technical in the piece. I kept a lot of this in the repository of our findings. But Gettr actually is able to see installed applications. So it's able to know what else is on your phone. And with all the other permissions that it has, you know, you can do some pretty malicious things. So, you know, Gettr could very much be weaponized either by the people running the network or by someone else who's taking, let's say, this old malicious version of Gettr and called Get to Me or Get Tome, whatever it is. They could take that and they could bundle it up as, you know, a malware, basically. So very serious risk here, very serious problems with being infiltrated directly, targeted directly, the kinds of things that can really ruin someone's life. That's what we're seeing here with Gettr. And, you know, if you're interested, obviously, you know, your audience, go out to talkliberation.com, check out the article. We do very serious, you know, data journalism, right? So in this piece, we have a Git repository. It has all the evidence we need. If other technical folks, and I certainly know many of them and have already sent them these results, if they want to double check my work, that's awesome. We encourage that sort of thing. We want engagement, so.
I'll certainly be linking your article and the website in the description below. And one of the other things I wanted to say about the splintering of these social medias, and I think what Gettr tried to do is create a mirror of Twitter, you know, porting all the data, faking fake followers, you know, they have exactly the same look of Twitter. I think that this is a recipe for failure, because when you're trying to invent something that already exists, and why would any normie or normal person adopt it? I guess for both of you, how would you like to do this? Perhaps you can tell us about how Panquake would be innovative and would appeal to normal people to adopt it just on their own.
Sure, I'm very happy to do that. So first is the obvious. Panquake doesn't look like Twitter. We haven't based Panquake off of Twitter's UI. We have instead created a whole new custom UI. And also we wanted it to be next generation. We want it to be cutting edge. We want it to be something that is going to revolutionize the way that people use short messaging services. And so that's why we have incorporated things like drag and drop panels, excuse me, so that there's a customizable interface. You can actually make it look how you want to make it look. You can resize different parts and move different parts around and make it however is easiest for you to use. All the content is dynamically updating, which means you don't have to go to different pages and go forward and back all the time. You don't have to open a whole bunch of different browser tabs in order to use Panquake. So it's very fast because you're not waiting for page loading times, and there's no scroll bars or anything. Just swipe up, swipe down, or mouse wheel up and down to interact with the content. So we also put you in control of like when new content pulls into your timeline. There's a manual refresh button, so no more of this like being pulled away from what you're looking at like Twitter does to you. In terms of why Panquake will appeal to everyone, there really is something for everyone in it. Like obviously Gen Z is all about cutting edge tech. They want new functionality that doesn't exist anywhere else, and so that's exactly what we give them. We came up with 4 major new pieces of functionality that dramatically enhance social reach and engagement that no other social media platform has. So things like the ability to send a notification that every single person who follows you will receive. Things like the ability to opt into sharing content in advance, even if you're offline. So accounts that you really love and trust, your followers can see that content even if you're asleep in bed or away on holiday. So we've done just really cool stuff around curation and sharing of content. Everything's really fast. It's like the workflows are all just a few clicks and then you're done, or in some cases just one click and then you're done. We've really minimized the amount of time that you have to spend on the platform in order to get big impact out of the platform. So definitely Gen Z should be really happy. And there's a major cute factor as well. several parts of the interface that really are just super cute.
You can never
Baby
underestimate the power of cuteness.
Yeah, well, Pancake, right? It's just there for the taking that it was going to be pancake themed. So, baby boomers really want to solve the social dilemma. The social dilemma has been, I think, viewed by 150 million households now because it was #1 on Netflix, and it did do a good job. I mean, yeah, sure, there's some legit criticisms of the documentary, but it did do a really good job of bringing home to people exactly how they are being exploited by big tech and abused by big tech. And like I said, fixes what is broken. It fixes those problems. So it's, a big win for anyone who's concerned about the social dilemma. Definitely is a dream come true for Twitter users who are disillusioned with that platform. It's a very grassroots oriented, which is how Twitter was in the beginning. So very much this takes like the original ethos of short messaging, but updates it, like brings it into 2022 and not like, 2007. Millennials are going to love it because of blockchain and crypto. I mean, we're really contributing to that space in some innovative ways. Privacy advocates are going to love it because they love digital freedoms. They're all about free and open internet. And that's exactly what Pancake is about. And content creators are going to have their lives changed by it. Like, I don't know how else to put it than that. You are going to have access to all of the people who want to see your content, and they are going to have access to all of your content in a way which is not happening on any of these other platforms. Because every time these platforms put an ad or something they want you to see or want you to engage with into your face, into your timeline, they're stealing space from the people that you actually want to follow and want to see content from. And Pancake restores that balance. Like, now it is all about you only see what you have opted into seeing, what you have chosen and want to see. You will never see what we want you to see or someone else wants you to see. It's all, you are getting to reclaim your eyeballs. Like, really, that's like how I think about it. You're getting to reclaim that space for yourself. So yeah, I mean, Pancake, I absolutely think will appeal to everybody.
Sean, any comments on that?
Yeah, sure. I just want to touch on some of the things you said earlier. I think it's extremely insightful what you pointed out about just sort of cloning a network out there that's a Twitter or Facebook clone or whatever and launching it. It's not just that it's, easier to do that and therefore, not a huge innovation and who cares, it's boring. It's that boringness is not going to keep people engaged and wanting to use the network, right? So I've actually been involved in projects before and have run these sort of clone networks before, a little over a decade now, not to age myself too much. There are tons back then there were clones of Twitter, right? You get a few hundred, few thousand people into the network. They're in there and they're excited for a few minutes. And because you're not giving them anything new, innovative, engaging, they go right back to these other networks. And if what you're trying to do is just say, hey, this is an auxiliary network and we're going to make it just like the bad thing you don't like, there's not a long shelf life on that. So it's just bad practice. It's bad for everyone. And the internet's changing in very serious ways. We're moving from that Web 2.0 world to what people are starting to call Web 3, and trying to embrace that sort of, it's outdated thinking. It's not a good idea for anybody, for us, for our users either. So
I guess now, since we're ordering these pancakes, can you tell us how people can get pay for them, like get them on the table? How can we have Pancake start? And I think that the problem with all these new social medias popping up and turning out that they are honeypots, there is a lot of distrust out there in regards to who are the people running it. I know you've already mentioned that Pancake is not connected to any country or official or even billionaire It's crowdsourced, it's crowdfunded. People will doubt you on that. They will question whether it is another intelligence agency backing it. Perhaps you can comment on that, and perhaps you can tell us how we can actually get these pancakes that we ordered on the table.
So where we're at as the moment is that 1 year ago, we just had an idea. We hadn't built a website, didn't have a campaign, didn't have endorsers, hadn't built prototypes or didn't have proof of concept for our product, didn't have a functioning interface, didn't have a business infrastructure. And 1 year later, we have all of those things. So we've set up a multinational company in safe jurisdictions outside the US, which was the whole point of our first phase 1 fundraising. So we got a 3-phase fundraiser, 3-phase crowdfunding campaign. Phase 1 was set up that infrastructure, done. And I mean, you can see that we've done that. It's cited all over the net. Phase 2 was about starting our beta development build and actually building the product. And that we did exactly that. We brought on amazing coders, amazing technical staff. We have our proof of concept already done as of October for our P2P network, and for our user data store, which is the user getting to store their own data on their own device. Done. We now have just announced in December that we have got the beginnings of a functioning Pancake application interface. It works, it exists, and it's being finished as we speak. So that's another huge, massive milestone. And just before New Year's, we hit our phase 2 fundraising that was complete, which has launched phase 3. Phase 3 is the delivery phase. It's the last phase. Once we hit this target, we will have what we need to put Pancake into your hands. So that fundraising is 500K. The reason we need 500K is because we have to hire and train customer service representatives, account administrators. So if if there's some issue, like you need a refund, or is there something that there's someone there who can actually help you with that. We need content moderation team, because we will be making sure that horrific things like child porn, for example, will not be allowed on our network. Technical support staff, 27 on the ground at our hosting provider. So if there's some network issues, there are people available to respond to that. And then obviously to fund the actual rollout of the product, marketing it so that people can be aware it exists. So 500K sounds like a lot until you realize all the things that we need to get and do and put in place. We are already on our way. So if you check out pancake.com/donate, you'll be able to see our progress. Like I said, over 3,300 people have donated so far. We need a lot more. The faster that we hit that phase 3 target, the faster we deliver Pancake. So the people have a voice here in when they get Pancake. If you just passively sit and wait and hope, it may take quite a bit longer for us to be able to deliver it. But if you get active and you tell everyone you know, and you circulate the links and the content, then it will come faster. The more collective effort that we put into completing this final phase, the faster Pancake's going to come to all of us and change all of our lives for the better.
Thank you so much, and I think that's a good point to end on. Sean, Suzie, anything else, Sean, you wanted to say or add, or shall we finish at this point?
Yeah, I mean, just check out the article, of course. But I think more importantly, if you really want to support this kind of research in the future, consider subscribing. So we don't want to paywall our content. We want to make sure everybody can read it. But subscriptions to Talk Liberation support the Pancake build. So that money goes directly into development of something new, a real replacement for big tech. So that's what we're working on. Excellent.
Well, thank you so much, guys, and you are welcome on my channel anytime, and I look forward to being liberated from the chains of censorship. So thanks again, and see you next time.